Kansas Territory, spring of 1872. The sky was the color of ashes, and the wind carried the scent of rain and broken things. Victoria Granger stood barefoot in the muddy yard behind the house she had once filled with hope. Her nightgown clung to her legs, damp from the morning dew. The door behind her slammed shut, rattling on its hinges. She did not flinch. Her arms wrapped around her belly, flat now hollow. "You're useless," Henry spat from the porch. "You couldn't even keep the baby alive. What good are you now?" She turned her face away, not to hide her tears, but to keep herself from answering. Her fingernails dug into her skin as he stomped down the steps and disappeared into the barn. The door swung wide, then banged shut. She stood alone under the wide gray sky. The stillbirth had come 5 nights ago. No one had come to help, not even Henry, not really. He stood back while she screamed and bled, and then cursed her when the baby arrived cold and silent. A boy. She had named him in her mind Peter, but never spoke it aloud. Henry had not asked. She stayed outside until her feet were numb. Then she went inside, washed her hands, and packed a small satchel. Just one dress. Her Bible. The baby's blanket, and used, soft as clouds. She walked away from the house without looking back. By the time the sun reached the top of the sky, her strength was gone. She sat by the side of the road, her boots caked with dust. The land stretched flat and endless. She had no plan, no family left. She just could not stay. A rider came over the ridge, horse moving at a patient trot. The man was lean, tall in the saddle, his hat pulled low. His shirt was dusty, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and a rope coiled neatly at his side. When he saw her, he slowed. "You alone?" he asked, voice low and steady. She nodded, too tired to lie. He swung down. "You all right?" She shook her head once. He did not ask more. He crouched beside her, offered a canteen. She drank. "I'm Roman Nash," he said, watching her like a man watches a wounded animal, careful not to startle. "Victoria," she said. He waited. When she said nothing more, he stood and looked out over the road. "I have a place north of here. Small ranch. I could get you there. Safer than sitting out in the open." She looked down at her hands. They trembled. "I ain't looking to take anything from you," he added. "You're still here. That's enough." Her throat tightened. It was the first kind thing anyone had said to her since she lost the baby. "I do not have any money," she said. "Not asking for any," he answered. She looked at him for a long moment. He did not look away. Then she stood. He helped her up onto his horse and walked alongside, boots crunching in the dirt. They did not talk much. She liked that. He stayed close, not too close. Just enough that she felt safer than she had in weeks. They reached his land by late evening. It was not much a snug cabin, a lean-to for the animals, and a field greening with spring. He helped her down, led her inside. "You can take the bed," he said. "I will sleep out in the barn." "You do not have to, I want to," he said simply. She sat on the edge of the bed after he left, her hands folded in her lap. She could still feel Henry's words, like bruises under her skin. But Roman's voice echoed louder. "Now you're still here. That's enough." She slept through the night, without waking from nightmares. The next morning, he was already gone to tend the horses. She found bread and beans on the stove, a note beside them in a careful hand. "Eat. No rush." She ate. The days passed slow and steady. Roman did not ask her questions. He offered work feeding the chickens, folding laundry, small things. She did them. It felt good to move, to use her hands. He spoke gently, never rushed her, and never touched her without asking. One evening, she came out to the porch. He sat on the steps, watching the sun set over the field. She sat beside him. "Thank you," she said. He looked over. "For what?" "For not treating me like I am broken." "You are not," he said. "You are just hurting." She swallowed hard. He said I was useless, that I failed. Roman leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You carried a life inside you," he said. "You lived through the worst pain a person can. You are still standing. That is not failure, Victoria. That is surviving." Her breath caught. She looked at him, really looked. His eyes were tired, but kind. There was something in them that saw her, not her past, not her grief. Just her. "Do you have anyone?" she asked. He shook his head. "Parents died in Missouri during the war. No siblings. No wife. Some days I think the land is the only thing that remembers me." "I will remember you," she whispered. He looked at her for a long time. "I would like that," he said. The wind picked up, warm and soft. She leaned her head on his shoulder. He did not move away. That night, she dreamed of a house full of light. And when she woke, she did not cry. Roman brought her wildflowers the next day. Just a handful, rough-stemmed and uneven. He set them on the table without saying anything. She pressed her fingers to the petals. Later, as they shelled peas on the porch, he asked, "Do you think you would ever want to stay?" She looked out over the field. The sky was wide and full of promise. "Yes," she said. "I think I would." He nodded, his mouth twitching in what might have been a smile. "Then you stay as long as you want," he said. She looked at him. "What if I want to stay forever?" He turned to her, serious now. "Then forever it is." The morning light filtered through the cotton curtains, soft and gold, as Victoria stepped barefoot onto the cabin floor. The wooden planks were cool beneath her feet, and outside, a mourning dove called from somewhere near the edge of the barn. She tied her hair back with a strip of calico and poured water into the basin by the window, splashing her face with purpose. She found Roman in the corral, one hand resting on the neck of a roan gelding, the other adjusting a worn leather strap. He glanced up when she approached, but didn't speak right away. The air between them had settled into something quiet and steady, like a stream that ran too deep to break the surface. "I'd like to help with the fence line today," she said, brushing her palms together. He gave a small nod, then passed her a pair of gloves from the saddlebag. They worked until the sun was high, Victoria handing him nails and holding boards while he hammered. She noticed how he moved with care, not slow, but measured, like someone who'd learned to be precise because he couldn't afford not to be. When a knot in the wood split beneath the hammer's weight and startled a pair of quail from the brush, Victoria flinched. Roman set down the hammer and rested his hand lightly on the top rail. "Did he ever hit you?" She didn't answer right away. A breeze stirred the grass around her ankles. "No," she said finally, "but he wanted to see me small. He liked me quiet and ashamed." Roman looked out toward the hills. "Some men mistake control for strength. He told me I was weak for grieving," she said. "You loved your child," he replied. "That's not weakness." She looked down at her gloves, stiff with dust. "Do you ever think about having a family?" He leaned against the post, gaze thoughtful. "Used to figure it wasn't for me. I didn't have much to offer, and I got used to the quiet. But sometimes I wonder what it'd be like. A home that doesn't feel temporary." Victoria nodded once, then turned to gather the scattered tools. They walked back in silence, side by side, their shadows falling long behind them. That evening, she lit the fire while Roman shelled corn at the table. She stood when the kettle began to whistle, and as she poured the hot water into 2 cups, she spoke without turning. "I used to sew little shirts at night," she said. "Before, even when I was too tired to keep my eyes open." Roman looked at her hands as she set the tin cups down. "Do you still have them?" She shook her head. He burned them. The room held still. The fire popped once. "I've got fabric in the chest outside," Roman said. "Was my mother's. I never knew what to do with it." "I'd like to see it," she said, her voice low. They sat across from each other, the lamplight softening the hard lines of the day. She reached for her cup, fingertips brushing his. Neither pulled away. The next morning, Victoria found the chest at the foot of the barn loft. Inside, folded with surprising care, were lengths of faded gingham and muslin, a few pieces of wool flannel. She ran her hand across the top layer, then chose one pale bolt the color of sun-bleached wheat. She spent the afternoon cutting and stitching at the table outside. Roman passed behind her as he carried feed to the stock, pausing only once to glance over her shoulder. "You got good hands," he said. "I used to sew in the evenings on the porch back home," she replied. Before he stopped letting me. Roman crouched beside her then, not touching, just close enough for his voice to carry gently. "If you ever feel like making something here, something just for yourself, you don't need to ask." She looked at him, something quiet and fierce rising in her chest. "I might make curtains," she said, half smiling. "Or a quilt." He met her gaze. "Make a life if you want." Their eyes held. No promises, no rushing, just the truth of it, plain and steady. That night, as she folded the fabric and set it aside, she found herself humming. It was a tune she hadn't remembered in years, one her mother used to sing while hanging laundry in the wind. She let it fill the cabin, soft and sure, as Roman leaned in the doorway, listening without interrupting. And when she lay down to sleep, she didn't feel like she was borrowing a bed anymore. It felt like her place, her beginning. The wheat came in taller than expected that year, catching the early summer sun in long golden waves. Victoria stood at the edge of the field with a basket at her hip, watching Roman work the scythe through the far edge of the grain. His shirt clung to his back with sweat, and his movements were slow but steady, each swing deliberate. She didn't call out he wouldn't hear her over the wind, but she stayed, letting the rhythm of his labor settle something inside her. Later, when the lights softened and the edge of the sky turned the color of old copper, he came in through the back door, boots streaked with dust and wheat chaff clinging to his sleeves. She handed him a damp cloth and poured water into the basin without asking. He washed without speaking, eyes fixed on the floorboards. "You always work alone?" she asked, folding the damp cloth over the line. "Most days," he said. "Hired help's been hard to come by since the riverbank flooded last spring. Drove some folks out." She sat at the table, smoothing a scrap of flannel beneath her palm. "You don't worry about the quiet getting too big?" He glanced toward her, then to the window. "Not anymore." She sewed through the heat of the afternoon, the cabin door opened to catch the breeze. A neighbor stopped by near dusk, a man named Whitmore, with a limp and a pair of children back on his land. Roman met him outside, and Victoria watched from the porch as they spoke in low tones. Whitmore pointed toward the western ridge. Roman nodded once, then turned toward the barn. When he came back, he carried a rifle Victoria hadn't seen before, wrapped in oilcloth and worn thin around the edges. "There's been trouble near the gulch," he said. "A couple of cattle torn up, something mean moving through. Whitmore's missing a calf." She stepped down off the porch. "You going tonight?" He adjusted the strap on the rifle. "Won't be gone long. I'll leave the lantern lit," she said. He paused. "You don't need to wait." "I know," she said. The lantern burned low as the sky deepened into stars. Victoria kept her hands busy, sorting dried beans and lining them into neat rows across the table. By the time the door creaked open again, the wick had nearly burned itself out. Roman stepped inside, shoulders taut. "Find it?" she asked. He shook his head. Tracks ended near the creek. Could be a cat, maybe a coyote with a mean streak. Any sign of Whitmore's calf? No hide, no blood. Just gone. She poured him a cup of chicory and set it beside his elbow. He drank in silence. The next morning, she found him outside sharpening the blade of the scythe again, though the field was already cut. She brought him a slice of cornbread wrapped in linen. "You ever thought about getting a dog?" she asked. He looked up, surprised. "Had one once. Shepherd mix. Smart as anything." "What happened?" "Old age," he said. "She went quiet one morning and never got back up. I could ask around. Maybe someone's got a pup needing a home." He ran a thumb over the blade's edge. "I wouldn't mind that." In the days that followed, they settled into something deeper than routine. Victoria started leaving her sewing basket out on the table. Roman began stacking her firewood closer to the door. She made a vinegar wash for the horses' hooves when the flies came bad, and he patched the roof above the bedroom before the first thunderstorm rolled through. One evening, after the rain had passed and the air was thick with petrichor, she found him standing by the edge of the porch, watching the horizon. She joined him, arms folded across her chest. "I used to think I'd never feel safe again," she said. "Not really." Roman didn't look at her, but his hand found the rail beside hers. "Do you feel safe here?" he asked. "I don't flinch when the wind knocks the shutters anymore." He turned, slow. "I think about you more than I mean to." She met his gaze. "I think about you on purpose." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see where the stubble had gathered along his jaw. "I never thought I'd want someone to stay," he said. "But the thought of you leaving it sits wrong." "I'm not leaving," she said. His hand brushed the edge of hers on the railing. She turned her palm upward, and their fingers fit together like they'd been waiting. She didn't speak again that night. Not when he kissed her beneath the porch light. Not when she leaned into him with the kind of certainty that had taken months to find. And when he pulled her closer, it wasn't with urgency, but with the kind of care that said, "I see you, not just your shadow." Inside, the cabin held a stillness that felt earned. She closed the door behind them and didn't look back. By late June, the distant ridge turned gold with buffalo grass, and the creek behind the pasture dropped low enough to cross without boots. Victoria rose early, before the sun lifted the chill from the earth, and walked the edge of the field with a basket looped over her arm. She moved slowly, gathering sage and prairie clover for drying, careful not to disturb the ground-nesting birds that scattered at her steps. Inside the cabin, Roman was fixing the hinge on the root cellar door, his shirt sleeves rolled and streaked with pitch from the oil he'd used to loosen the pins. She stepped in without sound, hung the herbs on a twine line above the stove, and leaned against the counter as he wiped his hands on a cloth. "There's a wagon passing through tomorrow," she said, heading toward Abilene. "The driver's dropping supplies at the storehouse in town. I thought I might send a letter." He glanced up, brow furrowed. "You got someone to write to?" "No." She reached for the kettle. "But I want to let the county clerk know I'm staying here, that I won't be returning to my husband's land." Roman stood, the cloth still in his hands. "You sure?" She nodded once. "It's not a place I ever belonged, and there's nothing left for me there." He folded the towel slowly. "Then I'll ride in with you." "I'd rather go alone this time," she said, her voice even. "I need to walk into that office by myself." He didn't argue. The road to town was dry and ridged with old wagon ruts, the kind that jostled the bones and made every mile feel twice as long. Victoria sat beside a barrel of seed sacks, steadying herself with one hand on the edge of the bench. The driver, a man with wind-bitten cheeks and a broken tooth, said little beyond a polite nod when she climbed aboard. She preferred the quiet. At the clerk's office, she signed her name cleanly. No hesitation. When asked for her place of residence, she looked out the window toward the distant hills and said, "Nash Homestead, west of the creek bend." The woman behind the desk scribbled it down without lifting her head. By the time Victoria returned, the sun had begun its slow descent. Roman was crouched by the well, fitting a new rope to the bucket. She stepped down from the wagon before it stopped fully, her calves stiff from travel. He stood, wiping dust from his palms. "How'd it feel?" "Final," she said. "But right." That night, she found him at the edge of the north pasture, leaning against the fence rail. She walked to him slowly, the hem of her skirt brushing wild barley that had crept up along the posts. "I saw a girl in town," she said. "Maybe 12. She was helping her father load flour into a cart. Her face reminded me of my sister." "You had a sister?" 2 years younger. She died in the spring fever of '66. I was 15. She rested her elbows on the top rail. "I don't think I ever grieved her properly. I was too busy helping Ma bury her." Roman shifted his weight. "It doesn't go anywhere, that kind of sorrow. Just sinks deeper." They stood in the hush of the evening, the wind moving through the grass with the sound of distant surf. "You ever think about building on?" she asked. "Adding a room?" He looked toward the cabin. "I've thought it. If I'm staying," she said, "I'd like a space of my own. Not separate, just something I've had a hand in shaping." He met her gaze. "Then we'll build it. Together." They began the next day, marking out the frame with chalk and string. Victoria sawed the planks herself, despite the ache in her shoulder, and Roman worked beside her, neither of them speaking much. There was a rhythm in the shaping of wood and the lifting of beams, a kind of unspoken language. By the second week, the walls stood firm, and the roof beams were ready to raise. After supper, she stepped inside the unfinished room and ran her hand along one of the beams. "It smells like pine in summer," she said. Roman stepped in behind her. "Feels like something permanent." She turned to him, fingers trailing the edge of the window frame. "I want to be the one who names this place," she said. He nodded. "You've earned that. I want to call it Peter's Rest." He didn't speak, but his hand found hers, folding it into his palm. She looked up at him. "It's not just for my son. It's for me too. This is where I stopped running." Roman's voice was quiet. Then it settled. The wind picked up outside, rustling the canvas they'd draped over the roof beams. Inside that frame of raw wood and open sky, they stood without speaking, and something in the air shifted. Not new, but settled, rooted. When he kissed her again, it was slow and deliberate, as if everything they'd built, the trust, the steady rhythm of their days, had led to this moment. No rush, no fear. She rested her forehead against his. "Thank you for giving me space to grow." He touched her cheek, rough thumb brushing the corner of her mouth. "I didn't give you anything. You took it, and I'm glad you did." They stood a while longer in the half-built room, the scent of sawdust and summer wind all around, and when they walked back to the cabin, her hand remained in his. The heat settled low over the land by early July, the kind that pressed against the chest and slowed every movement. Victoria kept a wet cloth tucked beneath her collar as she worked, a wide-brimmed hat shielding her face while she moved between the garden rows. The tomatoes had come in early, firm and red, and she'd begun canning in the afternoons, the scent of vinegar and pepper wafting through the open windows. Roman returned from the southern ridge one evening with a shallow cut across his forearm and a furrow between his brows. She set aside the jar she was sealing and stepped close, inspecting the wound without comment. It wasn't deep, but it was angry-looking, red and swollen along the edge. "Barbed wire?" she asked, dipping a cloth into the basin. "Old fence post gave out. Didn't see the coil until I was already in it." She cleaned it in silence, the cloth turning pink as she worked. When she was done, she wrapped it with muslin, tying the ends snugly. "You need to let it rest," she said. "I will. I mean it. Infection's no small thing." He met her eyes, then nodded once. "I'll stay out of the field tomorrow." That night, after the lamps were doused, they lay quiet in the dark, the sound of crickets drifting through the windows. Her hand found his beneath the quilt. "I used to think I'd never trust a man again," she said softly. "I didn't think kindness could run deep enough." He turned toward her, his voice thick with sleep. "I used to think I'd die never having known what it meant to be chosen." "You were never hard to choose," she whispered. His thumb brushed the inside of her wrist. "You make this place feel like it's got a heart." When morning came, Roman kept his word and stayed off the land. He spent the day in the shade of the old cottonwood behind the barn, mending harnesses and oiling his saddle. Victoria brought him cold water and a plate of johnny cake, and when he tried to stand, she pressed a hand to his shoulder. "Rest," she said. "You earned it." He gave her a look that held no resistance, only something settled and warm. Later, as clouds built on the far edge of the horizon, she took the new curtains from the line and hung them in the room they had built together. The fabric fluttered in the breeze, and for the first time, the space felt finished. That evening, as thunder rolled somewhere distant, Roman stepped into the room with a small wooden box in his hand. He held it out to her without a word. Inside was a silver brooch, simple and oval, with a pressed sprig of prairie clover beneath the glass. She touched it with the tips of her fingers. "Where did you find this?" "Ordered it through the supply man." "Took weeks to come." She looked up at him, eyes shining. "Why clover? You picked it the first day we met." I remembered. Her breath caught. "I didn't think anyone saw me that closely." "I did," he said. "I see you every day." She pinned it to her collar, fingers trembling slightly. "You want me to stay here forever? I want to build a life with you. Whatever it looks like. Wherever it ends." She stepped forward, placed her hand flat against his chest. "Then let's marry. Not for show. Not to fix anything. Just because we want to." He leaned his forehead to hers, voice low. "Yes." They married beneath the cottonwood 3 days later. Whitmore brought his children to witness, and the woman from the nearby mission read a passage from the good book. Victoria wore her mother's brooch, and Roman tied a blue ribbon from the fabric chest around her wrist. There was no music, but someone hummed a hymn while they stood hand in hand. The kiss was quiet, full of promise, and when Roman whispered "my wife" against her cheek, she closed her eyes and let the words settle deep. The first night they spent as husband and wife, the rain came soft and steady, tapping the roof like a lullaby. She lay with her head on his chest, listening to the rhythm of his heart. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said. "You never needed to be," he answered. Through the seasons that followed, they built more than fences and sheds. They planted a second field, painted the shutters blue, and carved their initials into the frame of the back porch. Roman taught her to ride bareback, and she taught him how to read the sky for storms. A year later, a child was born in the room they'd raised with their own hands. A girl, dark-haired and strong-lunged, named for Victoria's sister. Roman cried when he held her, his hand trembling as it cradled her head. They raised her under a sky that stretched wide and generous, in a home where every board had been placed with care. She grew up hearing stories of wheat fields, prairie clover, and a day when a woman with nothing left walked away from pain and found a man who waited without asking for anything in return. Victoria never wore her old name again. She kept the brooch pinned at her collar, and every time Roman kissed her there, he whispered, "Still choosing you." And she always whispered back, "Me too."